Hey, welcome to Hear God's Word. This is Michael Loinger. In this podcast, we study and dissect the Bible to better understand what it means and is trying to say. We'll cover theology and dig into the original meaning through language and word studies. We'll even discuss scientific and historical ties, but we'll always come back to the basics. There's so many layers to the Bible, and it's all important. So, if you want to hear what God has to say, then let's dive in. All right, so I'm excited to finish off this story of the world wars that are going on, where Abram rescues his brother Lot and the Sodomites. And because he rescued the Sodomites, on his way back, when he was getting closer to where he lived in Hebron, most likely still at that point, he passed through the Salem area, which was the equivalent of close to where Jerusalem is, and he passed by the King's Valley, and that's where the king of Sodom met him, but also the king of Salem. And that's possibly why they call it that, because of this encounter. And nonetheless, they meet there, and Melchizedek, who's the king, shows up from Salem. And we talked about how he's so much more in the story than we would think at first glance reading it. But now they're still there and present at this valley. And after they've given a tithe, Abram, he gave a tenth of his possessions, money, whatever it was, to the king of Salem, because he wasn't just a king, he was a priest, but he might have been the only priest possibly of the one true God, unless he was training other priests. And we know that Abram also followed the one true God, God Most High, or El Elyon. So the end of the story, he's still in the valley, and it doesn't seem that he's gone anywhere, because the king of Sodom is still there. Maybe they started walking or got to Sodom, but it seems as if it's the same encounter as Melchizedek, even though that portion of the story is over. It says in 14:21, "Then the king of Sodom said to Abram, 'Give me the people and take the possessions for yourself.'" So here the king is essentially letting him keep everything except for his people. He just wants his soldiers, his people, his hostages, or I should say the enemy's hostages, which are his citizens, back. So in a way, this is a very generous king to offer something like that. He's very thankful to Abram, but maybe there is more to it than that, because let's keep reading. "But Abram replied to the king of Sodom, 'I raise my hand to the Lord,' or Yahweh, the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth, and vow." So Abram raises his hand, which is seemingly always been a sign of giving a vow or a promise or an oath. And so he raises his hand and gives a vow. He makes it under God. And so he specifically says Yahweh, the Most High God. So he's repeating what blessing was passed down to him from Melchizedek. And I was just thinking about this too, that it's possible Abram never had anyone to fellowship with, network with, or worship with, specifically to worship El Elyon, the God who is the creator of the heaven and earth, which we know his name is revealed as Yahweh. And later on, he reveals his name as Jesus as well, because Jesus is God in the flesh, and there's no other name by which we can be saved. And by that, he obviously has to be God if he's the only one who can save us. Again, however, Abram didn't have the privilege of knowing all of these things that we know now. He was being a pioneer and having a refreshing moment of being blessed by someone who was worshiping the true God had to have been a beautiful moment, as we talked about last week. But we have him vowing in the name of El Elyon or Yahweh. And it says in verse 23 that I will take nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or a strap of a sandal. That way you can never say, oh, it's I who made Abram rich. I'll take nothing except compensation for what the young men had eaten. As for the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share. So here we have Abram not wanting to take anything from Sodom. And we've talked about how he really does seem to be in pretty good grace with Sodom. He really was liked by the king of Sodom at the moment. And we know the king of Sodom's not pulling his leg, that he'll actually let him go away with it, and he's not going to attack him. But hold on a second, as we were talking about, why doesn't Abram want to take the things that, he rightly deserves for getting back all the hostages? The king is willing to let all of his people's stuff be given to the possession of Abram. Abram was already pretty rich. And so Abram was saying, I don't want you to be able to be the one to claim that you made me rich. I already am doing well. And he even gave, it seems, of his own possessions and belongings, maybe not even stuff that he got from the Sodomite reconquest, or like getting back the people from Sodom that the kings had taken. Let's go into a couple other factors related to this. And I think maybe it's possible that he could have also learned a lesson while he was in Egypt. I mean, he got some possessions that he got to take away with him. And so, in one sense, it turned out all good, even though he made a pretty big mistake relationally, and he left some damage. And the king of Egypt, or Pharaoh, told them to get out because he deceived him. And so, what if Abram learned a little bit of a lesson that, I may have gotten stuff from that Egypt trip, but, dishonesty is not really, I didn't do anything to earn all that stuff I was given. It was basically a get out of here sort of gift. And it's possible that maybe that was something that influenced or was going on in the background of his mind, or maybe it even came up to the forefront and he just had a pause and hesitation, like, oh, this feels wrong. I don't want to make a bunch of possessions off of this, even though I could rightly, say it's mine because I was told by the king, that he's giving it to me. So now it's fully mine. He didn't want to get caught up in a web. And I don't know if you've ever either been on the receiving or the giving end of situations, like if someone gives you something, but then they expect you to pay up later. So in one sense, what they gave you wasn't really because they love and they care about you. It was kind of an obligation, like, hey, you did something to help me. Yeah, I'm going to give you something. That way I know if I need to guilt trip you and call you back sometime later, I can put that on you. And so whether or not the king of Sodom was thinking or going to do this, or whether he thought he had good intentions or not, Abram just wants to stay clear of any future potential drama. And I think that he's using a lot of wisdom here. He already has what he needs. He's already given generously to the priest, and he's already gotten his nephew back. What more does he need from the king of Sodom? He would have been well off in the same place even without conquesting. And he did say, you can pay me back for what all your men ate, because as Abram was bringing all of these Sodomites back, they obviously had to eat something on the way. And so Abram might have even brought some of his own food. And if he did bring food, which obviously they would have brought food for the way there and the way back, if the Sodomites didn't have food of their own and they didn't take anything from the kings that they defeated, and they didn't have anything left over to bring back with them, really that's the only thing that Abram asked compensation for. And that's something that you can't really hold on a person. Like, oh yeah, my men did drain his resources, I can't hold that on him. So Abram is asking for help in this manner. So I'm pretty sure either the king gave him food of equal quantity, or he gave him however much it costed in finances to be able to feed the men from up north above Damascus. So Abram's wise and he's staying out of the web. And, the king of Salem is probably still here. Melchizedek is probably listening into all this. And so I think that he had some good company with him, and God was obviously there, his presence. And so I believe God was inspiring him to make a smart call, because we also probably know something else about the Sodomites. Yes, Abram had good relations with them. He obviously earned their favor by helping free some of their captives. But they were also, as we'll read about, and we already have started, a really evil, horrible city. And so I don't think that they went from being these nice, really lovely, wonderful people to absolutely wicked and horrible in the matter of a couple chapters. As chapter 13, verse 13 even says, now the people of Sodom were extremely wicked rebels against the Lord, or Yahweh. And so we already knew some of the backdrop behind these people. They are not worshiping God. When they had this ceremony and they were celebrating with Abram and the king of Salem, this was a new god to them, or a different god at least. We know that Mamre and Eshcol and Aner, some of Abram's friends and allies, they knew probably who Yahweh was just because of Abram talking about him. And it's possible that Melchizedek, if he really did come before the flood and maybe was a well-known, you could say, sage or important hero figure to the people of those days, if they saw him as this, ancient one who was following the way, they obviously had respect and they weren't going to challenge Abram or Melchizedek, because Melchizedek, on top of it, was a king. So they were, as Sodomites and the king, acting subdued because they knew if Abram just took out the kings that defeated them, they'd stand no chance against Abram and his men. And so, is the king of Sodom really trying to trick, deceive, and butter him up for something in the future? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But the key is that Abram is wise enough to say, hey guys, no thanks, I'm all good. I'm not even going to take a thread. I'm not even going to take a little part of any of the clothes. I'm not going to take any of the sandals. I'm not going to take any of your swords as weapons. Everyone can always use more, resources. But he says, no, I'm not going to. Y'all don't owe me anything. Just give me a little bit of compensation to equal out what I helped in food costs, and we're all good here. And so did Abram act a little cold or give the cold shoulder? I'm not sure. I think it could have very easily been a, kind and gentle response back, like, hey man, no thanks, I appreciate it. At least in our colloquial speech, he may have been like that, or it's possible that he's like, hey man, I don't want any trouble in the future. I don't want you being able to hold anything against me, to say and claim that you're the reason why I got to the spot I am in life, and holding that against me as blackmail for something in the future, or guilt tripping me into helping you with something else that I don't have any business or need to. So I'm just going to stay clean of this. I know you're trying to act nice to me right now, but I know how wicked you guys can be and that we don't worship the same God. You could ask me to do something that's troubling to me. And so thanks, but no thanks. With that said, there is this last component where Abram says, no thank you. I'm good. I'll take a pass on anything you have to offer. It says that even though he just took the share for just the food costs, he told his 3 friends who, like we talked about in the last episode, probably also brought soldiers or an army of their own. Because how do you think they defeated the Far East kings who were monsters and beasts? Like, they were a force to be reckoned with. If Sodom lost to them and they were an entire nation, and here Abram is this, individual, this guy who has a small little tribe in his house and some friends. Obviously, they had to have had God's help fighting with them, but he also probably did have some help from them, because it's clear that they went with him. The only way they could have taken back some stuff, unless Abram had decided to, take a share back specifically for them, but then that wouldn't make any sense if they weren't present and Abram said, oh yeah, I'm going to take some back to give to my friends, because then the king of Sodom could say, but you still took stuff personally yourself, and I don't know if you distributed it to your friends or if you were just claiming it for yourself to try and look good. So it's clear that the 3 guys who lived around him as neighbors, they came to battle with him, or they were at least traveling buddies. And at the same time, I don't think they would get a share in it if they didn't help fight for the Sodomites' freedom. Or Abram probably wouldn't have said, hey, you guys didn't play a part, but you guys deserve to take some of the Sodomites' stuff and their possessions and share that the king's offering. So did they take it? It doesn't say. And really, that's all that we can say for the rest of this story. And we continue on next with the rest of the story of Abram's life. Hey, I'm so glad you guys could join for today's podcast. I hope things clicked for you and that you're able to better understand God's word. Jesus said, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. So, keep on listening to what God has to say, and I'll see you guys next time. God bless.